Major spoilers for Deltarune and Undertale. So my block tree video did well, thanks for that. While I was getting background footage for that video, I decided to read the puzzle sign, just to explore everything the room had to offer. Revolve around the center and look carefully. The darker it gets, the more you can see. That first line sounds like a reasonable puzzle hint for the puzzle you do, revolving around the center and then you see something you couldn't see before. But that second line? I decided to show these two lines very briefly in the video, knowing that they may be important, but I decided it wasn't important enough to record more lines for the video. Surely this doesn't mean anything, right? Well, like many people thought that about the block tree, I thought that about these signs. Then I got some comments. Underneath a comment by Snarlinger, who made a great video about the barrier between diegetic and meta. If you're watching this, then you'd be the type of person who would enjoy that. JFB reminded me about the cryptic eye puzzle sign that reads, "In this world, only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way." After that, I began thinking about it. I knew about the strange sign for the dark bulb puzzle in Queen's Mansion, but I wondered if there were any other cryptic puzzle signs that expand upon darkness in Deltarune. And I couldn't find any others about darkness. There is the talk about the shadow flares and reverse tanning from Susie and Lancer before the forest maze, which is after the block tree room, which is after Starwalker and Eggman. Dang, did they really just cram everything into those rooms? There's even Gaster's entry number 17, but none of those are puzzle signs. If Gaster's entry number 17 is about the same kind of darkness in Deltarune, which I think it is, then photon readings being negative could describe a dark world, meaning there's either 0 photons or there's some sort of inverse photons that have the ability to reverse tan something. Knowing Toby, it's probably both, so that'd line up with other double meanings, with the most popular being Determination, LV, EXP, and Flower. Wait, no, Toby hasn't done that. Either way, both the reverse tanning and Gaster's entry number 17 are about darkness but aren't puzzle signs. So if I didn't find any puzzle signs about darkness, what did I find? And the puzzle sign for it describes it similar to how light works in Castletown. But what about the other puzzles? What do their signs say? If they even have them, which not all of them do. Well, join me today as we discuss cryptic puzzle signs, darkness, and light in Deltarune. Let's go through all the puzzle signs in order of appearance. First we have the eye puzzle. This sign says, "In this land, only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way." We begin this journey in an unfamiliar place that still has yet to be explained, with the writing that describes something unique to this land. This land, which turns out to be a dark world, requires our eyes to be covered in darkness in order to see while in the dark world, assuming that what the puzzle sign says is true. Which actually does bring up the question of who wrote the sign and why, but that's too much. But in our world, and likely the light world of Deltarune, our eyes require light to reflect off of objects into our eyes so that way we can see. So if within a dark world there isn't light, then how are we able to see? And why is everything vibrant? Well, actually not here, but I'll get back to this later, but perhaps vision in the dark world works similar to light, except instead of light, it's dark rays that reflect into our eyes and make things vibrant. The Susie and Lancer reverse tanning dialogue helps support this. The next puzzle was assigned as the timed button puzzle that requires multiple people, the one where Susie just chooses to walk through the spikes. This sign reads, because signs don't speak, "Check the clock. In order to solve this puzzle, you'll have to hurry." For 13 out of the 17 puzzle signs in Deltarune Chapter 1 and 2, they'll just be puzzle hints or instructions. I'm not talking about light or darkness. Not too important, not too unimportant. All have rich flavored text, but only some will fill you up. The next sign is the one that gets vandalized by RK, the Rules card. I'm a Papyrus Knight myself, but I respect Chris Knight. What? No, I don't want to spam fire become a member of the Sweet Captain Cakes. Also, I'm not an Animal Crossing dog. No Knight's also good. Rouse reads, "Oh look, Chris, another puzzle." Oh no. Let's read the instructions. Huh? The instructions are vandalized. It says, "Thou's fools! Thou will never figure it out now." Reading instructions, that's definitely against the rules. Then it, says, "P.S. I make my own rules. RK." Well, that explains that. Yes, Ralphie. I think that explains that quite well. Actually, no, that was Susie. Inspecting the sign yourself says, the puzzle description has been smashed into graffitied, where the graffiti is written in overwrought Gothic calligraphy. While this has nothing to do with light and darkness, it does show us how Rules Card tried to stop us by just vandalizing puzzles that are better than the ones he used in Card Castles with a calligraphy pen. Don't worry, Rules, I loved your Chapter 2 fight. It's also interesting that his initials could be misinterpreted as Roaring Knight. Probably just a red herring, right? Well, this is sadly not a Rules Card video, so we won't be talking about him for a while. Also, yes, he will be in Chapter 3, and yes, it does make sense for him to be in the Dream or Dark World, as he's in your pocket, just like Lancer at the end of Chapter 2. 2 rooms above, we get another puzzle sign. This one is for Broken Key C, the one needed for Jevil. This sign decrees, from the bottom, the order of our rooms in Card Castles. Of course, if you haven't been there, you wouldn't know it. Rechecking makes it decree, really emphasizing that it's impossible if you haven't been there. While not about darkness or light, it does bring up the question of who made this puzzle, as it guards a piece of the key needed to unlock Jevil's jail cell. Freedom. My next small theory video will be about Jevil, so stay tuned. There is one question I have, though. Did Sean make this puzzle? Probably. Having lived once in Card Castle is reasonable, as he was the court magician while Jevil was the court jester. Also, magician? Sean writing the sign with a tuft of meta-knowledge fits Sean, as he seems to be more aware than the other Darkners. He wrote it so that someone who would be capable of handling Jevil would not be able to beat it unless they knew what they were doing, and went back for this, or remembered on a new playthrough or looked it up, but Sean wouldn't know that. Right? Right? Then again, any Card Kingdom Darkner could have made this puzzle, like a Rudin or the Jigsaurian Smorgasbord, which guards the puzzle, if the plot value is higher than 150, which is after getting captured at Card Castle. It was probably Sham though, let's be honest. Unless it's Rules playing mind games. One room down and to the right, and we get to the second very, very interesting puzzle sign. The one for the Great Board. This sign confesses, when you step into the light, you'll return to where you were before. Light? At this time of day, in this dark world, in this part of the unused classroom, localized entirely within the floor of a checkerboard.
Yes.
May I see it? Yes. So apart from the whole light and the dark world thing that I'll get to later, is this used anywhere else? Actually, yes it is, and it's much more obvious and noticeable than the sign. Castletown Chapter 2. When we step into the beam of light in Castletown, we return to where we were before, outside the closet, lining up with the information on the Great Board sign. Now I should address the light that happens when you see a dark fountain, and why you appear in the room and not outside of it or back in the closet. Well, either the annoying dog was doing some sneaky stuff after the fountain of Chapter 1 to move Chris and Susie out of the closet and into the unused classroom, or sealing the fountain works differently. Like Lightners in the Dark World getting placed calmly into the Light World room, close to where they would be. In Chapter 2, we see Susie and Chris towards the entrance, which would make sense as they just jumped in and landed on the table. There is one question I have though. Why can we have a small sliver of light in the Dark World without making everything super bright, causing the Dark World to disappear, or making any Darkner like Ralphie within turn into an object? Well, try this yourself. Go outside. Hold up an object or look at your shadow. If it's nighttime, cloudy, or the sun has exploded, then I'm sorry. Go back inside, turn on the light, and do this. Or you can just watch like a normal person. A shadow on the ground makes the ground darker, but not to the point where we can't see anymore. And in comparison to not seeing at all, I'd say a shadow's pretty bright. Heck, if it's cloudy outside, you can still see easily despite being in the cloud's shadow, and at night, you're in the Earth's shadow, seeing only due to reflected sunlight off the moon. This just leaves one question. Can we see in the shadow of the night's hand? So a real-life shadow shining darkness onto the ground doesn't do much to the world, correct? So why have I gone on a tangent about real shadows? Well, in Deltarune, I'd say the Great Board Puzzle and the Castletown exit room are similar to real shadows. They shine an inverse shadow, which is light, that doesn't do much to a world covered in darkness. This would require a dark world to be made of inverse photons, dark rays, or shadow flares, rather than a dark world just being no light and nothing else. Otherwise, a small amount of light would light up the entire place. Sealing the fountains with light from our soul would be like turning off the lights in a cave, from being able to see to not being able to see. In a cave, we can see due to artificial light, but when the lights are off, there's nothing we can see. No inverse photons either. In Deltarune, we can see due to being blinded by darkness, but when the light takes over again, we can't see for a while, and we can't see the dark world either. There's a lot more I can say about light, but I'll save that for the end of the video. It's interesting, and it's what required the Undertale spoiler warning. Let's get back to the puzzle signs. The first suit puzzle has a sign, so let's read that. It's called Suit Puzzle in the files. I read from the dialog box made from interacting with the sign. Enter the password. Note, due to everyone forgetting the password, it's written at the top. Not much to gain here except that all the Card Kingdom people are bad at remembering the code due to many silly puzzles throughout the kingdom. Also, why did I fail that? The next one isn't really a sign, but it's a vandalized answer at the place where you fight Clover. No, not that Clover. Interacting with this says, it looks like it's supposed to be a solution to a puzzle, but it's vandalized with a calligraphy pen. Looks like the order of the symbols was red, black, red. Rules card strikes again. Vandalizing puzzles to try to stop the Lightners with a Gothic calligraphy pen. Calligraphy. Our final puzzle sign for Chapter 1 is the one in the block tree room. Revolve around the center and look carefully. The darker it gets, the more you can see. It appears we have reached a return. As we rotate around the center, for some unexplained reason, the world around Chris gets darker, apart from the ground outlines and the bullets and spawner. However, the block tree switch becomes visible, fully visible when the ground and Rouse are no longer visible. If we go back to the eye puzzle, it said that only eyes blinded by darkness could see the way. To see the switch that we need to proceed, the world needed to become darker, allowing us to see more in the dark world, and the way gets shown to us. My block tree video provides the idea that the block tree switch is a preview of a Neo-Dark World Darkener, or a Darkener. Neo-Dark World meaning a dark world within a dark world, like what Birdly was about to make in Chapter 2, and possibly hinted at by Gaster in entry number 17 in the chair for the sweepstakes. The only reason we'd be able to see the block tree switch as a Darkener without being a Neo-Dark World would be if the area around us became darker, allowing us to see what would happen along this prophesized way. If being blinded by darkness allows us to see both the way forward and see more, then what does being blinded by darkness actually mean? I'll get into how you actually see while in the dark world later, but for this sign, do we take it literally and say there's some substance of darkness covering eyes? Or can you take it metaphorically and say something along the lines of being blinded by fiction, allowing you to see more ways for a story to go? Perhaps this would be like a fanfiction writer that could even be Gaster himself, in a way similar to how Molly Stars says in the Device Theory Part 3. If you haven't seen Molly Stars' Device Theory, then I'd highly recommend it, given that you're watching a puzzle analysis video on Deltarune. Anyways, some people said that the block tree puzzle looks like a clock, and it... Wait a minute. It has 12 normal trees permanently. I say normal trees permanently as the 13th is a block tree switch, and the 14th blocks the way. It might look like you can walk around it, but that's definitely not the case. It's the one that disappears after you flip the switch. I don't have an explanation for what being a clock would mean, but perhaps someone else can come up with something. It goes counterclockwise if that helps. Anyways, that brings us to the end of Chapter 1's puzzle signs. There were lots of them. Some were just flavor text, while others had very cryptic messages. Now for Chapter 2. Compared to our 8 puzzles with signs for Chapter 1, there's either 8 or 5 puzzles with signs for Chapter 2. The dark bulb one is weird. In total, there's actually 9 puzzle signs, but 3 of them get replaced with one sign later that doesn't say anything about the puzzle because you already solved it. It's weird, we'll get to it. Our first puzzle sign is actually all the way in the city, not beginning in the cyberfields. This puzzle is the crosswalk crossing puzzle. The sign says, "Welcome to Cyber City. Pedestrians need to press a switch to cross traffic." Okay, so most of the Chapter 2 puzzle signs don't have the same cryptic messages that 3 of the Chapter 1 signs had, so we can quickly get through these basic ones. This sign for the crosswalk is simple and is reasonable as a guide for someone who's visiting the city and needs to use the crosswalk. However, it doesn't let pedestrians know that pressing them will have varying effects on the cars. Gungaderos? The next 2 signs are for the mouse puzzle rooms. The Mice Puzzle 1 sign showcases, mice will rotate 90 degrees when they collide with the block. Citizens must push blocks to get mice in the holes. Use the bell to reset. The Annoying Mouse Room 2 sign exhibits, the citizen's duty to properly rotate and release the mice using the traffic signs, and then it lists the controls to use the traffic signs. These signs would suggest that the Queen forces the cyberworld darkness to do puzzles to communicate on foot, like she instructs the swatchlings to buy junk. If only the roller coaster was finished, or there was a Ferris, we would need tanks with giant wheels for that. Now for the big stuff, the dark bulb puzzle. Oh come on, what did I forget? The teacup ride? Oh, the one with the party of 4 after the ball throwing game. The treasure of air, where 3 are 1, placed 1 to 3. Perhaps it means we all have to enter one teacup? Well, I don't like doing it, but it works. This sign seems to just be a puzzle hint and nothing else. Other than describing balloons as the treasure of air, there isn't anything strange. I originally said this might be for the unused sky mantle, but actually, thanks to the recent newsletter, we have a new possibility. Chapter 5. In the newsletter, Toby teased us with a balloon. There are a lot of balloons for this specific puzzle, so maybe it's related to the one in the newsletter. Maybe it's foreshadowing like the block tree, or maybe it is just random. There are fun interactions for this puzzle, but this room is the worst to navigate, with one-tile walkways and stairs. Okay, now for the dark bulb signs. We'll go through all 4 of the signs first, and then have a tangent in the middle of it, but then we'll talk about the first sign. The first sign, the one with 3 colored shadows for the Queen's face, instructs, these dark bulbs will cast a bright shadow on the ground, filling the space with dark to unlock the way. If this were any other game with any other world, it would just be colored lights, but specifying dark bulbs that cast a bright shadow and filling the space with dark, yeah, this is why I said we're going to come back to this later. The second sign, the one with 4 shadows that form a triangle, says, this puzzle is for staff only! Guess, please head back to your rooms. Yeah, this is just flavor text. Tasty though. The third sign, the one with 5 shadows of different shapes that combine to form a square, for some reason doesn't work like this, says, staff, if you're stuck, please don't call for help. No one can hear you. Not in this beloved death trap of a mansion. Ack, this one tastes bitter.
Stop taunting me with that appealing blue shape! You're just lucky this isn't online, or you wouldn't be able to taunt.
I would recommend watching Half-Bred Chaos's video, What the 4 Shadows Foreshadow, which asks if these shadows are foreshadowing. Something's a bit strange. Are we getting seemingly innocent foreshadowing puzzles related to darkness in each chapter? With the block tree being darker yet darker, and the dark bulb puzzle literally being foreshadowing. Actually, it's 5, but shh. Anyways, about the sign. It's just flavor text with a hint of regal laughter, with Queen acknowledging that the mansion is dangerous. And now for the 4th sign. What? A 4th sign? But there's only 3 puzzles. You see, these rooms are still here, and even if I go in here, the rooms are still here. However, they won't in a minute. Okay, and then if we head left. The puzzles! Where'd they go? Where's my puzzles? Where do they go? Well, after you clear the puzzles and make it through the Ralsei cutscene, the puzzle rooms get conveniently shortened. Probably not diegetic and just for player convenience, like with the rooms outside Card Castle being removed after you go through them with Lancer. Or is it diegetic? Anyways, this sign informs, the other 2 puzzle rooms have been removed unceremoniously by a giant hand. We ask our guests for their understanding and kinda hope they weren't in there. Ooh, this one tastes juicy with a hint of... with battery acid? Ah! The giant hand is likely referring to the hands that clap in the acid tunnel of love, or the Giga Queen's hand. So, do we consider this as lore or just a funny joke? If it's lore, then that means the rooms of a dark world can be shifted easily if there's no longer a purpose to them, which could mean that the rooms outside Card Castle that get skipped are actually gone. I doubt that one actually disappears, as you're able to see Card Castle from a different point of view, and you actually face a different direction when you walk through the loading zone. But if you don't want to call that one canon, then I do have something you cannot ignore. Room removal for secret bosses. Spoilers for the secret bosses if you somehow didn't know about the #1 rated salesman 1997, or that clown around town. There are a few rooms that get removed after their purpose has been fulfilled. We have the forest maze here, and then we have the rooms between the Thrash Zone and Card Castle. There's the 3 dark bold puzzle rooms, but then there's also the secret boss rooms. For Jevil, you have the cell door that leads into the circus tent. If you look not so closely, you'll see that the cage extends past the ground of the stairs, almost like it's out of bounds or something. If you instead see the darkness in the room as walls instead of a pit, then that would make the whole cell door being off the edges of the room seem way more suspicious. Take note of the door here. Currently, I haven't fought Jevil, but the door is still here. Now that I've beaten Jevil, the door is gone. The door being removed after you pacify Jevil or you win Jevil's game is somewhat odd, but it wouldn't be as crazy as, say, a giant toilet appearing to stop you from reading the Mice Puzzle 2 sign after you reach Queen's Mansion. Yes, that's a thing. I highly doubt the toilet matters. Right? Perhaps the circus tent was removed so the door was too. Spamton's arena, on the other hand, is more interesting. Before you fight Spamton Neo, there is a wide, decently sized hallway with tracks. This room has an entrance below and 2 exits above. The left exit goes to where you end up after the fight, while the right exit leads to another narrower but still decently sized hallway with the Neo suit that has a Spamton crystal. Spamton crystal! Shadow crystal that Spamton has. After you beat Spamton Neo, instead of just walking into the same room with tracks and extension to the right, you end up in a completely different room, one with no tracks, and one that takes you from the end of the fight back to the basement save point. The tracks, the entire right side, in the room that had the Neo suit, vanish, replaced with a wall. I highly doubt you can chalk this one up to only being convenient for the player. You'd think the easier thing to do coding-wise would be to take you back to the same room, but instead, it's a completely different room. Both of the secret boss areas so far occur in the basement of a castle or mansion, which may be the cabinet closet looking thing due to the shelves. If this room disappearing thing has significance, then it would likely happen again for the Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 secret bosses, with their arenas disappearing after you clear them, after their purpose has been fulfilled. So what? What does this all mean? Well, if these arenas that disappear are at the bottom of a dark world, then what if they sink into an abyss of some kind after there's no more use for them? But why are hallways like the ones leading to the arena getting removed? Well, perhaps having hallways that lead to nothing is redundant, so what if the Dark World gets rid of them in order to conserve energy? Of course, if the Dark World was getting rid of rooms to conserve energy, that would only make sense if the Dark Fountain could dry up over time, if the source of it was limited. Okay, I'm sorry for this, but we're going into a tangent within a tangent so I can more clearly explain what I think about darkness. If you see any writing on the screen, I'd probably trust that over what I'm saying, because I'm way better at writing things than speaking them. The ideas surrounding darkness in Deltarune are a bit vague so far. For example, we don't know if it's like made when you stab the ground with earth, or if it's like a substance like underneath Hometown. I'm on the side of darkness being a physical substance that has to flow out of somewhere, seeing that darkness seems to flow out rapidly when we strike the ground with enough determination. And I'd say it's more of a substance rather than just being created when you strike the ground with enough determination, because if you go outside right now with a knife and stab the ground, I don't think anything's gonna happen, except maybe you or the ground getting hurt. As we don't have a lot of information on darkness, there is a bunch of assumptions that have to be made, but until it gets proven wrong in a later chapter, I believe darkness is like a substance, and there's a lot of it under Hometown. Regardless of where the darkness is flowing from, there must be a lot of it for something like the roaring to happen, seeing that's when darkness overshadows the light, and that we have to seal the fountain manually instead of letting it run out, if that's even possible. Unless there's just infinite darkness underneath the earth, eventually it'd have to stop flowing. Although, if it's enough, then the entire surface could be covered, and then some. So if running low on darkness isn't the reason why rooms disappear, then what is? Maybe it's because there's no more stories to tell within those rooms. Okay, alright. This is like saying that a hallway disappears after you go through it, because it has no more purpose once you leave. But then other hallways stay, as there is at least something that they offer. This is like saying that a hallway disappears after you go through it. The hallway disappears, hallway, hallway.
Who's ready for
I don't think this is connected, as the underground from Undertale is not a dark world. That's not saying that there couldn't be a dark world in Undertale, though. Also, the Mystery Man door looks like a grayscale version of the teleport doors, which were not originally in the Dark World, according to Jigsaw Joe and Mr. Elegance, the Night Piece. No, not the Roaring Knight. Anyway, perhaps the Dark Worlds are like fiction, creating stories for the objects within it. Then, if we removed everything of note from an area, then there would be nothing within to make a story with, apart from how wide, decently sized, and empty it would be. Or apart from making a story for why it disappears, like I'm doing right now. Honestly, I don't really have a concrete answer for why rooms disappear, and maybe I'm just going insane from the wait, but maybe the rooms really do disappear just because their purpose has been fulfilled. Also, after you turn off the force field in the basement and ride the jumpscare teacup ride of death, the whole room is locked off, with trying to go back in saying, the door rattles but doesn't open. Oh, wait. This is technically a puzzle, so I think I can justify talking about it more, despite it lacking a sign. When you enter the room, after running past the smiling wall plugs, it seems like it has nothing in it. Then you run to the left and you see nothing. But now you turn back, but now the way out has disappeared. You're locked out of the outside. So then you run to the left again to see if you're truly trapped, before you see Image Friend, very briefly, if you're fast enough. Then your ride arrives. You turn off the force field, ride the teacup ride of death, and when you return, the way out has reappeared. Leaving causes you to be locked out of the room. The interesting part about this to me is that the room just traps you in there. A seemingly empty room in a basement, with no entrance or exit. Soft-locked, wasting away from potassium deficiency. Perhaps you would have been trapped forever, if it wasn't for Image Friend. The sprite name is in all caps and formatted like other gas-related files, so maybe they were there to help with unsoft-locking you and Chris. And as for why the way out would have disappeared, well, there was nothing in the room. Well, nothing except for Chris, a lightner. So perhaps because it's an empty room with no purpose or story to tell, it'd be blocked off. And perhaps this could happen even if a lightner was within. Death's Holiday? Perhaps rooms get cut off because they have no more purpose, because they have no more story to tell. This could potentially mean that lightners could be trapped within, like we have with Chris, potentially because they're not native to the Dark World. This could be a reason why Death went missing, but really we don't know much about Death apart from her being likely to be the one trapped within the code. We'll probably learn a lot more about Death in Chapter 4, as the recent newsletters have teasers for Chapter 4 associated with the Holiday family, such as Noelle in the basement or a holiday tree. Although, this whole room's shifting and not being connected does sort of remind me of video game glitches, perhaps the kind that Noelle would have found. So perhaps there is some merit to this, who knows. You could maybe connect the storage closet from Chapter 1 to room removal, as it was empty with no walls, light switch, or chalk. But I'm hesitant because it was sort of in the light world and also in the dark world. I don't know, it's still kind of strange and mysterious. We'll probably get an explanation for it later. Anyways, the room traps you because it has no purpose, until Image Friend appears to save the day, calling the teacup ride, giving the room the purpose of being a challenge to unlock a force field, so that you can reach the Neo body. Or maybe Image Friend was just watching and I'm completely wrong. But either way, the room gets blocked off once you leave, because now it genuinely has no purpose. You already turned off the force field after all. Once you make it back up, the teacup ride breaks and falls, with the room waiting to do the same once you leave. Every other room at least has an item or something that makes it unique and gives it a purpose, but this, all it has is an inaccessible switch that can't be used again as it's already pressed. How did Spam to make it to the Neo suit if there was a force field? Maybe Swatch can remotely turn it on so they don't have to go through the teacup ride of death, I don't know. Anyways, maybe I'm just reading into locked doors and transforming rooms too much. Well, that was room removal, but what about the opposite? If removing everything of significance from a room leads to the room being removed, then what if you brought many significant things to a small area? Perhaps the gathering area of a town. Are there ways for Dark Worlds to expand past what they already are? Yes, I would like to say that there is. Castletown. When we first bring the Card Kingdom Darkners over to Castletown, the center of the town expands, transforming 4 placeholder buildings into fully functioning establishments. The chess pieces begin to build another great board where we fought the Ralsei dummy, and we get to go inside the castle with the promise of more rooms. Although those likely existed before we brought the Card King of Darkness over. After bringing the Cyberworld Darkness over to Castletown, which is something that you don't actually need to do, and it may actually change something in Chapter 3 if you don't do it. Please, Toby, I'm begging you, make this a thing! If you recruited enough Darkners, the Sweet Cap and Cakes will build a music room that lets you listen to 18 select songs, and a Lancer button. This is beautiful. Doing this also lets you buy CD bagels from Sham. We also learned from the September 2022 Deltarune status update that the cafe will expand in Chapter 4 if you bring the right recruits, which at least includes Shadow Guy and Task Manager. By expand, it means like it's literally expanding in lengths. So with this, we can see that bringing more recruits and Darkners to Castletown will result in Castletown expanding, or at least the buildings will be upgraded. But I think it will be it's just going to increase in size. This is gonna be a stretch, but what if you could create more rooms in a dark world using this method for a dark world that isn't Castletown? As I've said many times, at the end of Chapter 2, you do not have to drop off the Cyberworld Darkners in Castletown. So what if you brought them to, say, a dark world in the Dreamer House? Perhaps there would be a few new rooms or changes specifically because of that. I really feel that not returning to Castletown in Chapter 2 will have a big impact, but at the very least it'll do something, like a cameo, hopefully. But at most, perhaps it could be a continuation of the weird route, sort of breaking how the game's supposed to go, not bringing the Cyberworld Darkners to where they're intended. This would go more in line with the weird route being more about breaking the game, and it's not just doing Undertale Geno again, but you're manipulating other people this time. Regardless of if Cyberworld Darkness will do something for Chapter 3, at the very least we know Rules is going to attempt to acquire snacks with someone at a certain time. I believe that this actually won't happen in Castletown, as I don't think Ralsei would think Rules would want to fight if they are in Castletown, and I don't think the dojo is a place for snacks. In fact, it seems like they'd meet Rules after getting done with a fight against someone else. Or maybe Ralsei's referring to another fight, like the one in the Acid Tunnel of Love, which having Chris and Ralsei almost fight Rules would parallel the encounter in Chapter 2. Perhaps this encounter could happen during the long no-saving portion, as we learned from the Winter 2024 newsletter. The newsletter which happened to be released during the editing. Anyways, I could still be wrong about this and Rules isn't really that relevant, but who knows. He is in your pocket at the end of Chapter 2 though, just like Lancer. Okay, that was a tangent and a half. Now that I've gotten depth about room removal and additions, it's about time we get back to the first Dark Bulb sign. Remember that conversation with Susie and Lancer about reverse tanning?
Hey, move it, Captain Toothpaste. You're blocking my reverse tan. But Shadow's flares are making us as pale as a horse.
The lack of objection from Ralsei either implies Lancer is right about how darkness can turn people paler, or that Lancer and Susie's shenanigans have gone so far that Ralsei just gave up. It's probably the first one, as it'd be weird for Ralsei to not object to something wrong here, but then in the next few rooms, the Forest Maze, indicate to not follow Lancer and Susie. And then, you know, the whole roaring situation later. The Forest Maze is another set of rooms that get removed, but since the save points still mention the maze, they're probably just skipped for convenience. This conversation helps explain how sight and darkness works. Flares of shadow make the ground darker, but the lighteners in us see it as brighter. In terms of the Dark Bulb puzzle, when we shine a bright shadow on the ground, our eyes see the ground as increasing in brightness and vibrance. In reality though, the Dark Bulb is still making the ground slightly darker than it already is, explaining the fill-in with dark part of the puzzle. Perhaps you could think of it like this. A dark bulb's like a light bulb, shadows flares are like sunlight, and I guess the dark fountain would be like the sun. Of course, instead of rays of light from a light bulb or the sun, it's rays of darkness from a dark bulb or the dark fountain. The increasing vibrance aspect explains why the fountain changes color when right next to it. If more darkness means something appears more vibrant and bright to someone in the dark world, then the fountain should look vibrant up close where it's darker. The increase in brightness and vibrance explains why the Dark World versions of Lighteners look more colorful and fun than their Light World counterpart. Finally, the paling described by Lancer would be explained by an increase in brightness and a decrease in vibrance. A decrease in vibrance doesn't sound right at first until you consider tanning and sunburns. They make you appear darker or burnt. If a sunburn makes you appear darker or burnt, then I guess reverse tanning or a dark burn would make you appear brighter, and perhaps less vibrant as a result. My explanation of how darkness works is entirely based off of 4 lines of dialogue, a few sprites, and our world's shadows. I've probably gone insane, haven't I? Chad, I think I'm becoming a secret boss. Well, I believe that by now I've covered all the puzzle signs in Deltarune. What? Again? Again? How did it happen again? When I went to all the ones that... Oh. Mice Puzzle 4. The one in the acid tunnel of love. The one where the mice turn and it's impossible to get the dark dollars from the chest. Where you need the mice to go in both of the houses. Also, the houses in the Queen and Rousey banter actually do have a purpose. If you graze by them, you get more TP for the rules fight. Something neat. Okay, this is the actual final puzzle for this video. So, our final puzzle sign for the video says, "Dear guests, please note that our mice will turn at every crossing. Our vermin have been specifically handpicked for higher turning. Enjoy." So I guess that means that these mice are just built different. Do you get it? Because they're mechanical mice, they're built... never mind. It wasn't even a mice pun. There wasn't anything special about this sign that warranted saving it for the end. I just forgot it until finishing the script, like with the Treasure of Air teacup puzzle. The one that could be related to Chapter 5, or the Sky Mantle, who knows. Although also it means that the signs are chronological, so that's fun. Do you get it? Because they're made out of, like, robot... cardboard plastic material. Why would I say cardboard? As we went through the puzzle signs, we covered how darkness works to let us see, with the being in the dark world making things that get even darker appear more vibrant and brighter to us, like negative photons more than just the absence of them. That's not all I can say about darkness, but that's for my next long video, one that might be the biggest stretch I've ever seen. Biggest stretch, just play a montage of what I just said for the past 5 minutes. But it would logically explain why we only see dark worlds in Deltarune, and not Undertale or real life. Some of the puzzle signs were cryptic, such as saying you can only see the path forward if you're blinded by darkness, or you can obtain the Treasure of Air. Others were pretty straightforward. It's a citizen's duty to manage the traffic signs so they don't have to play Frogger to commute. But out of all the signs, there was only one about light. Compared to darkness, which is more cryptic, there are a few notable examples of light, and I'm not referring to the light that lets us see. This light is a power that allows people to become stronger, a power that lets you seal a dark fountain, shining a light from your soul to completely remove the darkness from an entire world, bringing it back into the light. If I may, I would like to go in depth about the power of light in both Deltarune and Undertale. Light. All Lightners can make a dark fountain as they have enough determination to do so. It's highly likely that even the weakest monsters of the world of Deltarune have enough determination to make a dark fountain, as even though Birdly had his arm fried, he was still capable of making one, so perhaps it's reasonable to say that all Lightners can make a dark fountain if they tried. We also know that none of the Darkners can make one, or at least not the remaining Cyberworld ones. Otherwise, Queen would have just used a Darkner for her plan. So if all Lightners can open a dark fountain, then who can seal it? In the legend, Rousey describes a trio that appears at World's Edge. A human, a monster, and a prince from the dark. Only they are able to seal the dark fountains and banish the angels' heaven. So far, we only see Chris sealing the fountain with a human soul. Susie isn't needed, shown by the weird route. And Rousey isn't present both times, so he isn't needed either. So far, it seems that only Chris has the power needed to seal the fountain. So what power is this? The box list text that Spamton somehow knows about describes it as your soul starting to glow, before the soul rises out of Chris and seals the fountain, turning it into light. This is the only way we know so far for a dark fountain to be sealed, but we've only seen 2 fountains be sealed, so there could be other ways. Perhaps a dark fountain could naturally disappear if the source of it dries up. However, even if that's possible, with an aquifer theory, the dark fountains we've seen so far would likely have a steady supply of darkness so they wouldn't dry up quickly. Let's go back to how Chris sealed the fountain. They, or at least their soul, used light to seal the fountain. So what is this light power, and why have we only seen Chris with it so far? Let's begin with the first power of light, the save point. All the save points in Deltarune don't mention determination and aren't yellow, a color that's more associated with determination than red, at least 1 to 0. Instead, they mention that you are filled with the power from whatever's nearby, with the save point being colored white with a gray outline. Some examples of the power that save points say that you are filled with are immediate nostalgia, fluffy boys and mean girls, and a neon cat sign. So, is saving in Deltarune still related to determination? I would say no. Determination's still needed to create a dark fountain, but it's not needed for saving while controlling Chris in the dark world. Or at least, that's what I think. However, what if saving in Deltarune is still the same as it was in Undertale, just that we have an alternate way to save as Chris? One that would explain why we have 3 save files, and why the person we assume is Gaster comments about it on the file select. In Undertale, the being with the most determination in the underground has the power to change fate using the in-game save load system. What if the reason why save points in Deltarune aren't tied to determination when we play as Chris is that because there's a being that's more determined than us? Perhaps the Angel? If there was a being that was more determined than us, we'd have to use a different save load system, such as Light. Perhaps Gaster has something to do with this, the voice from the Vessel Maker in File Select. Then again, the in-game save load system for Undertale was tied to being the most determined in the underground, and I don't think we're underneath Mount Ebott in Deltarune. Probably. Even if saving for Deltarune has nothing to do with determination, I still feel that it's tied to Light. I'll explain why in a minute. The next power of light I want to discuss is combat. We see this when fighting very close to the Dark Fountain for the King and Queen fights. Perhaps using light to increase abilities is tied to being close to the source of the Dark Fountain. So, how is light used in battle? After using an act once in the battle against the King, the talk act for each member will change into Courage for Chris, and more importantly, Red Buster for Susie, and Dual Heal for Rousey. I say more importantly because all Chris's Courage does is increase defense for a single turn and is only used in the King battle. These Chris plus member act/spells, let's call them SPACs, are very powerful. Red Buster is stronger than Rude Buster, with Red Buster doing red damage instead of rude damage. Red Buster still does this thing where pressing the confirm button again will make you deal more damage. Dual Heal heals everyone in the party, which is a strange name for a healing spell that heals a whole party of 3, but alright. However, the most relevant part of these SPACs isn't the improvement of the spell, rather, it's the act. The act being from Chris with the text, "Your soul" shined its power on Rousey, or Susie. Power. You are filled with the power of immediate nostalgia. You are mostly filled with the power of fluffy boys and mean girls. The cat sign still comprises about 1% of it. This combination of the soul shining its power with the specific use of the word power is why I think that save points in Deltarune are based on the power of light. Now for why I think this fighting power is light. The word used for the act part of SPACs is shined, shining the human soul's power on the party members to make them stronger. We established that Lightners have determination, as Rousey wouldn't need to stop Birdly at the end of Chapter 2 if that wasn't the case. But the will to keep living or resolve to change fate doesn't seem like the kind of thing to directly make others stronger. Sure, you could say attacks and healing could be stronger due to someone being fueled by determination while using it, but no one other than Chris so far can shine determination onto others. Otherwise, someone like Susie could help Rousey use Dual Heal with her determination. Also, it doesn't seem like you can shine determination. From Undertale, we know it'd be more like something you can inject, a substance produced in large quantities in humans. So for Deltarune, it'd be produced by all Lightners, as they can all make Dark Fountains. A more fitting power the soul could shine onto others is simply light. Light can be shined. You shine a flashlight onto objects in the dark. Seeing that light is the opposite of darkness, perhaps using light in the dark world that has both a lack of photons and negative photons could be very powerful. From the puzzle sign in the Great Board, we know a small amount of light makes you return to where you were before. As for how the puzzle people got access to light for a gimmick puzzle, I have no idea. But the small amount of light used doesn't seem to overpower the darkness, so I guess it's fine. The light that shines into Castletown seems to work similarly, returning you to where you were, outside the closet, so that you don't have to seal the dark fountain to leave. Because these use a small amount of light without causing the dark world to disappear, it seems that there isn't enough to seal the fountain. Instead, it seems like you'd need a large amount of light concentrated on the source of the fountain itself in order to seal it. Perhaps natural light through a window would work. The previous Dark Worlds didn't have windows, which would explain how they could be present during the day if natural light could seal Dark Worlds. But the Dark World for Chapter 3, which is highly likely to be the Dreamer household, does have windows. Maybe the fountain won't be reached before daybreak. If this is true, the only way Dark Worlds could get out of control would be if the skies were blacked out by the product of creating a dark fountain. I mean, I could be wrong, but it sounds simple. Let's get back to that king fight. If light represents truth and darkness fiction, then perhaps shining light could help the target gain more power, such as during a climactic battle. In the light world, all the darkness are just everyday objects. Compared to objects, people and monsters are stronger. It wouldn't take much to rip a card or a computer in half, although one would be more costly than the other. But why would shining light onto Ralsei make him stronger if he really is a darkener? Well, consider where Ralsei's healing magic comes from. Heavenly Light. I'll go in depth on Heavenly Light shortly. So great, the power save points referred to is probably light. The power shined onto your party members is light. But how do we know that? How do we know that Chris has light? Don't forget, there's a line inside that says, "There's a light inside your soul," and it even shines in the cold. This could suggest that light is tied to the soul itself, specifically the human soul Chris has in their body. Another reason we know Chris has light is due to the most useful ability of light. It's as if your very soul was glowing. The ability to perform one of the greatest riffs ever. It's actually sealing the fountains in a flash of light. The light from the soul seals the dark fountain, overpowering the darkness in the room. We see this happen. The narrator describes this, and Spamton acknowledges this description by directly denying it. This is the power of the human soul in Deltarune. Also, the rift is called Your Power, another use of the word power for light. Perhaps Spamton wanted Chris's human soul for this light power. Actually, is it even Chris? The descriptions say, it's as if your very soul was glowing. Your soul shined its power. You are filled with the power. You called for Noel. Perhaps this light, this truth, is our power. Right now it's used with Chris around, so currently it's tied to Chris. There are things you could say thematically, like if light is truth, then like we are truth because we're in the real world. You could say something along the lines of that. I don't know the right terminology, so I don't think I'm qualified to talk about that yet. It could be the human soul though, still more powerful than monsters like in Undertale, but this time it's only due to light. Perhaps this means that Chris could get light magic later. We wouldn't be able to seal the fountains without this power of light, unless clogging the source of the fountain will work, like with a golden statue or a giant toilet. I doubt it though. Besides, another benefit to having Chris there is that we don't miss out on the guitar riff. Other than the Great Board and Castletown light, there is another aspect of light that we see in the game that isn't tied to Chris. The healing spell that Noel and Ralsei have, Heal Prayer. The description reads, Heavenly Light restores a little HP to one party member, depends on magic. This suggests that Ralsei or Noelle heal others with this spell by using heavenly light. Ralsei may be able to use other types of healing magic, as the type that Susie learns isn't tied to light. Ultimate Heal is just healing to the best of Susie's ability, which is less than 10 HP in Chapter 2. Here's a side note. On a random interview Toby Fox made about Deltarune Chapter 1 that was on the Nintendo Switch, he said he wanted to make a character start out with a weak spell, but over time, as they tried to improve, the spell would become more powerful. This interview is also the one with the dream that Toby had. Also, Susie equals Maya Fey. There was also a mention of slow internet. I wonder if that has anything to do with Deltarune. Wink wink, Chapter 2, wink wink. We don't see Ralsei or Noelle shining light onto others, but with the description of Heal Prayer, it makes sense for the healing ability to be boosted if your soul shined its light onto Ralsei. Therefore, there would be two sources of light, perhaps magnifying the healing ability. Would this mean that the light the soul possesses is heavenly? Maybe, maybe not. Are you heavenly? You could be. Regardless, I hope you're having a great day. The fact that the name has prayer in it could suggest that the light used for healing is borrowed, rather than coming from within, like with the soul. That would explain why the healing is boosted, as the soul also answers the prayer with its own light. Of course, this assumes that Ralsei uses an upgraded version of Heal Prayer for dual heal, like with Susie's Rude Buster upgrading to Red Buster. Also, this is probably just a glitch, but you can use Heal Prayer while in the overworld in Chapter 1, and get a static 100 HP after certain battles, like with the versus Susie fight, but it's probably just a glitch that's left in because Toby doesn't hate glitches. Well, that's everything about light in Deltarune so far. But there are things that are similar to light, but aren't. The most obvious is the Dark Bulb puzzle. We already talked about this. They cast shadow to make things darker, making them more vibrant and brighter to us. It's magic that allows us to see the dark world and not be blindfolded the whole time. Okay, you saw him just now. We're going to talk about the Duke of Puzzles again. Chips ahoy, landlubbers! Rulux's card. I am referring to the strange beams that he uses to teleport around. If the beam was made out of light, given he's a darkener, being exposed to a large amount of light would make him turn back into a rules card, though his teleport beams are likely not made out of light. Slowing it down, he starts out small, but not exactly in a card shape, so it's likely that he doesn't have light powers. Still, he can teleport without using doors, so I'd pay attention to it about the same amount of wondering how Ralsei got into Cyberworld. Probably more attention on how Ralsei got to the Dark World than how Rules teleports, because at least we see Rules appearing while Ralsei just showed up into the Cyberworld. Rules will probably be significant, as he has hints of power, but he's played as a joke antagonist that even Ralsei doesn't take too seriously. I mean, just look at the face he makes for the Summer 2024 newsletter translation dialogue for Chapter 3. That's a mouthful. Anyways, Rules makes a threat about unleashing his true power. He can fly while glowing, and he likes to use accents that make others get annoyed by it. Reminds me of a certain bad puns guy that has a special attack. Just keep an eye out for Rules. Capiche? Okay, now we're done with light in Deltarune. Unless you want me to talk about the sun, or somehow find evidence for vitamin D allowing Rudy to live longer than he did in Undertale. But that was light in Deltarune. What if I told you there was something relevant about light in Undertale? In Undertale, most mentions of light are traditional, describing brightness, letting you see the usual. But similar to how there were some cryptic puzzle signs amidst the traditional ones, there are some notable instances of light, such as the strange light filling the room where you fight Asgore, where twilight shines through the barrier. But the one I want to talk about is a special flash of light, when Flowey absorbs everyone to become Azrael Dreamer's OC, the god of hyperdeath, when there's a flash of light throughout the underground. It's debatable if the absorbing light is related to light in Deltarune, but it's still very interesting. The people who talk about this flash of light are the Snowden shopkeeper, who is likely QC Deltarune, Napstablook in Waterfall, and Metaton. All of them describe it as a flash of light, with QC specifying it was a white light. There's also Toriel, who describes seeing a flower and then everything going white. Toriel's description doesn't use the word light, but from the description of others it probably was. I'd invite you to take a guess on which one's gonna have the most detailed description, because it's probably not who you're expecting. Starting with the least detailed description, did anyone guess Frisk or yourself? If you did, you got 5th place out of 4, so why am I starting with Frisk or ourselves? Well, we see a flash of light as Flowey's absorbing everyone's souls. I'm just including it here as we're able to see it for ourselves to confirm that there is a flash of light when Flowey absorbs the souls. Okay, now with an actual description. In 4th place, we have Mettaton. Mettaton just mentioned that there was a flash of light before telling you to talk to other people. Mettaton was right next to Flowey, barely off screen, so it makes sense that Mettaton would say that they saw a flash of light. In 3rd place we have Toriel, who I already talked about. Toriel was even closer to Flowey, being on screen and trapped in the vines, so it makes sense that she would see a flash of light if Flowey was the source of the light. In 2nd place we have the Snowden shopkeeper, who's likely QC. QC still doesn't acknowledge that you're a human. She mentions the strange flash of light, then the feeling of their body being pulled into something before everything goes back to normal. QC's is a lot more detailed than Toriel's was, as while QC doesn't mention a flower, and both mention the light being white, QC has the feeling of being pulled into something, which we know is Flowey. QC is also notable as being the furthest monster from the barrier that mentions being absorbed by a flash of light. If the light made its way all the way to Snowden, it should have no trouble making it to the now open ruins. I specify this as light would likely have to go through many solid surfaces like trees or rock to reach the ruins, so the light Flowey uses to absorb everyone is advanced. Maybe it's just like a sphere or something, I don't know. So far, this use of light shows how Flowey absorbed everyone, but it doesn't seem to provide anything sound that may be worth further discussion for Deltarune. If light in Undertale has transportation capabilities, like with Castletown and the Great Board in Deltarune, then perhaps Flowey teleported everyone to him using the light so that he could absorb them. However, according to the Great Board, the specific light for that has them return to where they were before, and given that not all monsters are from the war, I'm guessing that most of them haven't been to the barrier, so they wouldn't return there. But also Flowey had like 6 human souls in him, so maybe he was able to make the light obey him and make monsters return somewhere where they haven't been yet. Perhaps light really is tied to human souls, as Flowey only does it when absorbing 6 human souls, or absorbing all the monster souls while having 6 human souls already. But if what I'm saying doesn't provide further discussion for Deltarune, then why am I making a whole tangent about light in Undertale? Flowey wasn't actually able to absorb all the monsters. There is one monster that did not get absorbed, and the reason they escaped the capture is what interests me. If you guessed the spooky DJ, then it's your lucky day. In 1st place, with the most detailed description, we have Napstablook. Let's hear what Napstablook has to say.
Also, this is awkward, but what's your name? Everyone seems to know it now, except me. Seems like I've been missing out lately. I was just sitting at home listening to tunes. There was a flash of light outside my window. I saw the snails on my farm disappear. Then I heard a knock at the door. The flash of light wanted to come in. I closed the blinds. Now everyone knows your name except for me. Frisk? Okay, I won't forget it.
Well said, Blookie. Blookie? Similar to before, we'll go through Napstablook's dialogue from least to most interesting. Napstablook notices that everyone seems to know Frisk's name after you save Azriel, but they missed out. This tells us that when Azriel learned Frisk's name, everyone inside learned too. The next thing is how Napstablook describes the flash of light outside the window, how it caused the snails to disappear, before there was a knock at the door. It's interesting how the flash of light was locked outside of the house, and how it wasn't instantaneous, as Napstablook saw the snails disappear before the knock at the door. If it was a normal flash of light, then it would have disappeared because it's just a flash, brief, and more importantly, it wouldn't be able to knock. Speaking of knocking, in response to an eldritch being trying to absorb everyone with a flash of light that can even knock on doors, Napstablook just closes the blinds. This is the ultimate foreshadowing, the ultimate weakness of the angel. All shall follow Napstablook when Noelle remembers you are Snowgrave and becomes the angel in Deltarune chapter 55. Remember, kids, the angel can only enter your home if you give consent. Therefore, it's a vampire. But wait, but it's debatable if monsters have blood in Deltarune. Where was I? Let's explore this knock and the reason why Napstablook was the only one not absorbed. The knock could have been the light itself somehow, but more realistically, I think it may have been one of Flowey's vines trying to trick Napstablook to go outside into the light. Honestly, it could have been anything. There isn't really evidence to support anything that could have knocked, but regardless of what knocked, there at least is something that knocked. Now, is this relevant or is it just a joke? Napstablook escaping absorption by closing the blinds is in character, but why did that work? What about everyone else inside of their houses? And it's not due to Napstablook being a ghost, as Mab Mew Mew was absorbed, and she isn't fully corporeal yet. So how did Napstablook escape the absorption? What about Napstablook's house allowed them to hide from the Flash but not others? Well, it is a JRPG, and monsters are based on emotion, so you could say that they would answer the door if someone was knocking. However, you actually can't enter most houses in Undertale unless you know them well, or get the key. And what about monsters like Napstablook who won't answer the door? So the new question is, how do you get to those that don't answer the door? Well, it is light after all. What if it worked by going through the window to absorb the monsters? And since monsters are underground, there'd be barely any reason to use the blinds if they even have them, unless they were trying to sleep. Also, Napstablook, you don't even have blinds. How did you do that? I think we're gonna have to assume that Napstablook does have blinds, we just don't see them, as Napstablook does talk about them. And besides, Undertale isn't the most consistent game when it comes to layout. So if the light tried to go through windows first, then to explain why the light didn't get to Napstablook, you could say that since Napstablook's typically shy, and they saw the farm snails disappear due to a flash of light, they'd be more likely to close the blinds compared to other monsters, since they had the time to react after seeing their farm snails disappear. Perhaps Napstablook's epic strategy of closing the blinds to the light is how we'll protect Hometown from the angel. The main takeaways are that the flash of light in Undertale is unusual like the light in Deltarune, and that it's possible to hide from it by blocking off ways for it to get in. Perhaps light is tied to human souls, which would make the light in Undertale have the chance at being the same kind of light in Deltarune. This would tell us what to look out for in the future, and it could be a way that Lightners could protect themselves if light ends up being evil or dangerous, but it's kind of a stretch. Toby did choose to make Napstablook the only monster not absorbed due to closing the blinds. Or maybe it is just because Napstablook's a ghost and I'm just wrong. But Napstablook does close the blinds when you try to enter the police office in Chapter 1, so perhaps Toby was trying to make a connection for those that read this obscure dialogue. Perhaps it's foreshadowing. Well, in this case it'd be forelightening, but I'm gonna be honest, I think a lack of chapters might just be getting to me. And so we have reached an end. I'd say that the Chapter 1 puzzle descriptions were generally more cryptic than the Chapter 2 ones, although that's not to say that the Dark Bulb and Treasure of Air puzzles didn't have things to talk about. Regardless of my thoughts on them, I hope that you were able to give these lines more thought and attention than you have before. And we didn't just talk about puzzle signs. I showed different examples of rooms being removed and gave the idea that the rooms get removed if they have no purpose. I hope that section in Queen's Basement was somewhat comprehensible, as I think it's the weakest part of the video. But I do think the Dark World expanding due to adding Darkners is pretty likely due to the cafe teaser. If I'm gonna make one somewhat crazy prediction for Chapter 3, it's gonna be that not going to Castletown after Cyberworld in Chapter 2 will do something big. It's at least got potential. At the very least, I'm looking forward to what Rules and Lancer will do in Chapter 3. I enjoy voicing Ruluxious Caird. The second half of the video was all about light, the unusual light in Deltarune that seems to have transportation and combat capabilities, and the flash of light from Undertale that may have plot relevance because Napstablook mirrors it in Deltarune Chapter 1. This video has been in the making for quite some time, ever since I made that poll back on August 5th. Shorter. That certainly aged poorly. Or perhaps it was perfectly. Anyways, I've been slowly chipping away at my goal of completing it, although I did take a 1.5 month break in the middle of it, but oh well. If you go back in time to when I made that poll and told me that the result of making that poll would be an hour-long video with somewhat decent editing throughout the whole thing, I probably would not have believed you. As I write this outro, I am hoping that what I've been working towards will have some sort of an impact. It'd be amazing if it did, but I kinda doubt that this will top the popularity that the Block Tree video got. That one was made in 2 nights, it had a great hook by saying this completely random tree was foreshadowing for Deltarune, and I even saw people sharing the video and using the term darker nerds, and I just... that was a good video, even if it took way less time than this one. Sadly, I've probably used all my YouTube luck with the block tree video. That and the BTD6 content farm from years ago, I didn't enjoy that because it felt too cheap and lazy. It felt too, like, not me or something. I don't know how to explain it. It's not always about the popularity, though. I'd rather just have one real person that takes this seriously and walks away from the video having learned or thought about something new and meaningful, instead of just seeing a ton of big numbers that keep getting bigger without anyone real on the other side. And hey, you're still watching this. You're a real person, right? Even if this video's just in the background, you're still listening to me ramble even after everything that I've talked about that may or may not have made sense. So, I want to thank you for enduring this hour-long video and making it to the end, through the good and the bad, through the somewhat fun moments to the bad attempts at humor, through lines that people are probably going to say sound like Bertley,
Which, by the way, I love trying to voice Deltarune characters such as the Frozen Chicken, or the mascot of the Lancer Fan Club.
Since you're real and your choices do in fact matter, if you enjoyed the video and want to help me, the best way to do that is to share this video with those that like Deltarune just as much as you and I do. You don't have to though. I also want to hear what you have to say about all this. What was good and what could be improved? Good criticism can help people understand their mistakes and be able to improve. So if you want to say what you believe about Deltarune, ask a question, or just say that I naturally sound like Birdly for some reason, which I wasn't even trying to do in the block tree video, but right now I am, then please, leave a comment. Anyways, if there's one thing to take away from the video, it's that you should pay more attention to puzzle signs, as they may be hiding hints beyond just a simple puzzle. And that light, to no one's surprise, is pretty important in a game about darkness, and that Rules and Lancer will be in Chapter 3, and that Castle Towns will grow, and that... I want to thank the Deltarune team for making such a great game that will hopefully continue to exceed our expectations. I also want to thank those that I credited in the video when I referred to or used their content. You should find links in the description to all of them. Please yell at me in the comments if I missed one. I want to give credit where credit's due. And I especially want to thank my friend Chef, who's been watching each part of the video as I finish them, and was able to put up with my near constant rambling about it. As I close this tedious but fun 6-month project chapter of my life just in time for my birthday, I hope you enjoyed this video as you wait for chapters 3 and 4, unless you're from the future, in which case half of everything has probably already been proved wrong. The only question I have left to answer is, will I make another video about the chapter 3 and 4 puzzle signs? Yeah, probably. I don't know. Oh look, it's Gaster!